Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the American Academy of Diplomacy virtual interview series. I'm your host, Kyla Denwood, and I hope everyone is staying safe during this time. The purpose of this series is to share the experiences of Academy members with students and the general public in hopes of supporting the Academy's mission of strengthening appreciation and understanding of U.S. diplomacy and foreign policy, and hopefully inspire the next generation to explore opportunities in the field. If you haven't already, please follow the American Academy of Diplomacy across our social media platforms for the latest diplomacy and foreign policy updates. Today, we're joined by Ambassador Maureen Quinn. Ambassador Quinn has had a very distinguished career in the US State Department, including as coordinator for Afghanistan, acting chief of mission in Kabul, and ambassador to Qatar. She has also served in Morocco, Pakistan, Guinea, and Panama. Ambassador Quinn spent half her diplomatic career at the State Department in Washington, where she served as Deputy Executive Secretary in the Executive Secretariat, Executive Assistant to the Undersecretary for Economic Affairs, and held a mid-career Pearson Fellowship in the U.S. House of Representatives. She currently serves as an adjunct professor at Seton Hall University, teaching a graduate course on the Middle East at the School of Diplomacy and International Relations. She has also taught at New York University and the Marx School of Public and International Affairs in Baruch College. She received her BA in French and Economics from Newcomb College of Tulane University and her MSFS at Georgetown University. Thank you for joining us today, Ambassador Quinn.
Thank you for having me.
Great, so we'll go ahead and get started. We would love to hear what sparked your interest in diplomacy.
Well, I would say that my interest in international affairs started from a very young age. And I often talk about it as an interest in civics and geography. And I'll start with geography. And when I say geography, I mean more about, it's not really a scientific approach to it, but this sense of, the people and their connection to the place they live in. And so it's the land and its peoples. The history, the culture, the society. From the civics, I would say as I, in my, when I was in school through grad school, and certainly in my career, I'm fascinated by how people relate to their government. So the state-society relationship. And I was very lucky, I was able to travel internationally. And certainly the junior year abroad that I spent in Paris while I was at and it was a Newcomb Tulane year abroad, was certainly a foundation for my career.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. So there are many students who are interested in diplomacy, but aren't based in the coasts or in major foreign policy cities. We would love to hear about your own personal journey from Newcomb College in New Orleans to the start of your foreign service career.
Right, so the one thing I would say about New Orleans, but also other places in the United States, is that the world comes to you and you can look for the world, particularly today, we're so connected globally. So for example, I looked it up when I knew I was going to have this interview, because I remembered how we were always having guest speakers come to Tulane while I was there. And so one example, because I looked it up because I said, okay, now who was it? I knew it was a very well-known figure from the Israeli government. And it was Moshe Dayan. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, well, I use him as an example, or his role in the 1973 war between the Israelis and the Arabs in one of the courses I teach. Mm-hmm. Another example was at the time, then President Gerald Ford came to campus. And there were others. There were also, it's not just about political figures or figures from other government, but we also had Lillian Hellman come and speak, authors come to campus. So that's what I would say to, certainly it played a role in my connection to the world and my thinking globally, but I think that certainly is true for other students today. In my career path, I knew I wanted to do something international, but I didn't know what. And so I studied French and economics, and I at Tulane, and that really was an excellent foundation for me, because I had both the language and the things that language brings to you, and understanding more of culture and history. And then I had economics. I had the elements of a functional school, a functional skill. And so I went on from Tulane to the Georgetown School of Foreign Service. I didn't really necessarily, it was like I didn't intend to do that. I wasn't planning on going to graduate school. But I didn't find an international job right out of college. I wasn't positioned to do that. And so I went to grad school. And in grad school, what really helped me focus my future career was I took a course in development economics. And that was really my pathway into my career, because I did an internship as well at the US Department of Agriculture during the school year. And then the summer between the 2 years of grad school, I did an internship at what was known then as the United Nations Sudano-Sahalan Office. And both of these, the internship at the US Department of Agriculture and at the United Nations, were focused on the developing economies, particularly in Africa and other places in what today is often called the global South or emerging markets. And it took, I had to take the Foreign Service exam a couple of times to pass it. And I didn't even necessarily solely focus on government, but the Foreign Service offered me, the State Department, the US government offered me the job. And I took it because it was my opportunity to go overseas and live overseas. Similarly, how did I end up my first tour in Karachi, Pakistan? It wasn't necessarily fully intentional, because with the State Department, they offer you, there's always a number of places that are opening when you're available, and you have to, meet certain criteria. And Karachi was on the list. And it really, that first tour at what was a consulate, doing both administrative and consular work, in a lot of ways gave me a foundation for my later career.
Great, that was super insightful. So you do mention going from New Orleans to DC and then sort of starting your international career from there. As you know, AAD member, US Ambassador to the UN and Louisiana native Linda Thomas Greenfield actually coined the phrase gumbo diplomacy, where she explained it as a Cajun spin on connecting with people to solve problems. Did you ever find that your time in New Orleans sort of influenced your international career in the long run?
My time in New Orleans definitely influenced my career in so many ways, because New Orleans is such a multicultural city. Mm-hmm. And it has both the strengths of a multicultural city, and I would say some of the real challenges of a multicultural city. Mm-hmm. So it was, and certainly since I was in New Jersey growing up and going to New Orleans, that was a different cultural experience. And it's still the United States, and but there's a whole different style of life in New Orleans, and very different both historical but also societal influences in New Orleans. I mean, as a young woman of color in New Orleans, I'm sure you see that in the United States today we're still dealing with racism. And I think it's something that exists in New Orleans, it exists here in New Jersey and in New York City, but its expression is different in different places.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I also just think that New Orleans is such a global city, and I feel like people oftentimes here at Tulane, where I go to school, say that it's sort of like as far south as you can get before leaving the country, basically. So I think you really hit on the dot with it when you said that, it's it's definitely different from the north. It's just a unique place in and of itself. But yeah, thank you for your insights. I would love to talk more about your time in the Middle East and diplomacy in the Middle East. So what led to your regional focus in the Middle East, especially after you finished up your foreign service career and started teaching about it?
Right. So again, it wasn't all planned. Okay. And it was opportunity, really. Yeah. And flexibility, I think, was on my part, and really on the people that I worked with at the State Department to give me opportunities. And that's really, I would say, part of my career story. It's about what skills I had, what I was interested in, what I was willing to do, and then the opportunities that I had. So I, in a way, also it goes back to, the assignment to Karachi was, I was in a very small entering class. We had a very small list to choose from. And yet that tour gave me this foundation in so many different ways. As a part of that going there, I was required to learn Urdu. And so I had 6 months of intensive language training. And that having that language was fantastic for that living experience and that work experience, and really was in so many ways a foundation for my career. And I say that relates to really my later time in the Middle East, because for a good part of my career, Pakistan was a part of the bureau in the State Department that today is called Near East Affairs, right? Okay, now there's a separate bureau that deals with South Asia. So I had that foundational connection. And Urdu is a language, it's a hard language, and it uses a script that is somewhat similar to the Arabic script. And when I went into the work in the Middle East, I learned some fundamental words in Arabic, and I learned, a little bit, but I never really learned to speak Arabic. But that understanding of a close associate of the Arabic script, I think also made me comfortable in the Arab world. And then I would say, actually, obviously, as you go on in your career, you become connected to the people in the region in different ways. And all I think about is that, I would be in an airport on a personal trip. Maybe it was a personal trip home, or it was a trip on business. And, all of a sudden I'm running into the foreign minister that I used to work with. So you have these connections. And the Middle East certainly was became a central focus of U.S. foreign policy in the times and my leadership points in my career.
Yeah, thanks. That was great insight. My next question is, you currently teach a course on Middle Eastern affairs at Seton Hall. So what are some current issues and trends in the Middle East that students interested in diplomacy and in that region specifically should be aware of as they're sort of thinking about their future career?
Right. So actually this semester I'm not teaching, but I teach 3 courses on the Middle East, or have at Seton Hall. And I teach another course at the one at New York University, has been on the Middle East. And then there's the one that I do at the Baruch College Mark School that's on post-conflict. And I like that one in particular because it gives me an opportunity to talk about what is really my first interest, which is development economics. But anyhow, on the Middle East and the issues there, I'd say there are three things to think about. The first is geopolitics. The Middle East is a crossroad, and crossroads areas can be tumultuous. They can be dangerous. There can be conflict, and there's also opportunity. And so I certainly have been and still am, and I teach in my classes about the geopolitics of the region and this connection of the location to the international relations. And obviously a lot of them are in the area of security, and that's certainly what so often from here in the United States that we talk about. It's the issues of, the competitions between with Iran, the nuclear question, the conflicts in Iraq and Yemen and Libya and Syria. Beyond that, though, I think there is also a whole range of the economic issues, and I'm able to talk about that in my classes. And today, as the United States has become a net exporter of oil, fossil fuels, and there's oftentimes, the commentary is that those interests are going to, that our need to have these relationships is going to decline. I disagree with that, because I think that the economic relationship and the opportunity for future economic relationships is broader than just that narrow field. And thirdly, I would call it the third area, and it mostly comes out in this course that I teach that's called The Politics of Terrorism in the Middle East. And in that course, it's the one course where I have the students really explore political Islam, Islamism, Islamist group, and of course the terrorism of the groups like Al Qaeda and the so-called Islamic State. And I do feel that area of what I would say, it relates to the whole state-society relationship, but it also relates to society and religion. And the United States as a multicultural, multi-religious society, we are Muslim, we are Jewish, we are Christian, we are Buddhist, we are Sikh. And that is something that I think is fundamental in our society. And so I think those issues as well connect the United States to the Middle East.
Yeah, great. There's a lot of things there for future Middle Eastern focused students to ponder. One question I did have coming from that is, are there any resources that you would point a student towards, sort of like a news outlet or things like that?
Well, I always tell my students to try and read a variety of news sources and to trying to get different points of view. So in the case of the Middle East in particular, I would suggest to read the two main Arabic news sites, but read them. Obviously, they're available in Arabic and in English, and that's Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya, because they on the same issue. They can give you very different points of view. There's also in English, there's the Fars news outlet of Iran. So there are these, and they're very easy to access. Then I recommend, obviously, your standard news outlets in the United States, and a range of them, so you get different points of view. And I also suggest, think about European outlets. And nobody has the time to read all this, but we all are searching on our phones all the time. And so from Europe, that's The Economist, there's Le Monde in France. But my one recommendation to students is definitely learn a foreign language, even if you don't advance, or you have, Americans, we often say, well, I'm really not capable, or it's so too hard. But language gives you that opportunity to learn more than just speaking or reading. It puts you in the culture. And if possible, look for those opportunity to go live, study, work, do a short internship of some kind, in a different country.
Yeah, great advice. Moving on to, I guess, more advice for students. What skills and experiences were valuable to you when you were beginning your career? And what should students be doing now to prepare for an international career, including learning a foreign language and trying to take some time abroad as well?
See, to me, that's the fundamentals. And you can do that in so many ways. And if you can't go overseas, I spend a lot of time in New York City, right? All you have to do is get on in New York City. I think it's the 7 train subway, and go into Queens. Queens, there's a part of Queens is one of the most multicultural cities, neighborhoods in the world. And so you can, if you want to, look for the world in your own community, because it's there.
Yeah, that's some great advice. And what's one thing that you wish you knew before pursuing a career in diplomacy?
That's the question. I thought about it, and there's so many things that I just don't have it. And I think that's, it's sometimes it's necessary to simplify issues, um, to understand them, or to decide, make decisions. But there are other things they're just not that simple.
Yeah, completely understandable. You spoke a little bit about how your career has sort of been a winding path where you wasn't you wanted to get from point A to point B, and then point B to point C, and you went from being a French student and economics student to moving to DC and then eventually becoming an ambassador. Do you find that that's sort of just the way it is when it comes to picking a career in international relations or international affairs? Is there really any set way to get from point A to point B, or is it more so a winding road as your career was?
Right. Well, one thing I to myself and to others that I've talked about recently is that I think a career in international affairs, and particularly in diplomacy, it's a wonderful opportunity to explore. It's a great adventure, and it's an interest in exploring. Certainly, I think was a driver in my career, and that openness to explore and want to learn. Um, New things and meet new people. One of my friends told me once, yes, kind of joking with me about how, yeah, yes, it's every 3 years you have a new opportunity. And I was like, yes, that's absolutely right. I really love that opportunity to, move to a different country or go back to Washington, or the year that, I got to spend a year in the fellowship working in the US Congress. That was so, I mean, there were things about it that I didn't like, and certainly, which I would say maybe shows where my career interests were. But I got so much out of that 1 year that I could use, and I did use without really, knowing it, in the future jobs after that I had at the State Department.
Perfect. Um, and that about wraps up our interview for today. Thank you for joining us. Do you have any parting words for students or the general public about diplomacy or anything along the lines of that topic?
I really don't, but I would just say to you, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. I really appreciated how you really worked hard to develop the questions, and it covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time, and it made me think about how do I focus what I have to say. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
Yeah, you as well.